From 1918 to 1919, the people of New Orleans had fear from the notorious Axaman. The Axaman would sneak into homes and slit the throats of his victims, and then would use an axe that usually belonged to the victims themselves and bash in their heads. The killer took the lives of 6 people and harmed 6. His first 2 victims were Joseph and Catherine Maggio. The killer broke into the home and then proceeded to cut the couple's throats with a straight razor. Upon leaving, he bashed their heads in with an axe, perhaps in order to conceal the real cause of death. Joseph survived the attack but died minutes after being discovered by his brother. In the apartment, law enforcement agents found the bloody clothes of the murderer, as he had obviously changed into a clean set of clothes before fleeing the scene. A complete search of the premises was not completed by police until after the bodies were removed. Yet later, the bloody razor was found on the lawn of the neighboring properties. Police ruled out robbery as a motive for the attacks, as money and valuables were left in plain sight. The razor used to kill the couple was found to belong to Andrew Maggio, the brother of the deceased, who conducted a barbershop on Camp Street. His employee Esteban Torres told police that Maggio had removed the razor from his shop 2 days prior to the murder, explaining that he had wanted to have a nick honed from the blade. Maggio, who lived in the adjoining apartment of his brother's residence, discovered his slain brother and sister-in-law roughly 2 hours after the gruesome attack had occurred, upon hearing strange groaning noises through a wall. Maggio blamed his failure to hear any noise related to this attack that had occurred in the early morning hours on his intoxicated state, as he had returned home after a night of celebration prior to his departure to the Navy. Police, however, were none the less surprised that he had failed to hear the intruder, as he made a forced entry into the home. Andrew Maggio became the believed chief's prime suspect in the crime, yet was released after investigators were unable to break down his statement as well as his account of the unknown man who was supposedly seen lurking near the residence prior to the murder. The Axeman's next victim was Louis Bessemer and his mistress Harriet Lau, both of which were attacked in the early morning hours of June 27, 1918, in the quarters at the back of his grocery, which was located at the corner of Dorganese and Larp Streets. Bessemer was struck with a hatchet above his right temple, which resulted in possible skull fractures. Lowe was attacked over the left ear and was found unconscious when police arrived at the scene. The couple was discovered shortly after 7 a.m. on the morning of the attack by John Zanka, a driver of a bakery wagon who had come to the grocery in order to make a routine delivery. Zanka found both Bessemer and Lau in a puddle of their own blood, both bleeding from their heads. The axe, which had belonged to Bessemer himself, was found in the bathroom of the apartment. Bessemer later stated to police that he had been sleeping when he was bashed with the hatchet. Almost immediately, police arrested a potential suspect, Louis Rubicon, and then 41-year-old African-American man who had been employed in Bessemer's store just a week before the attack. No evidence existed which could have proved the man guilty, yet police arrested him nonetheless, stating that Obicon had offered conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the morning of the attack. Shortly after the attempted murder, Laus stated that she remembered having been attacked by a mulatto man, yet her statement was discounted by police due to her disillusional state. Robbery was said to be the only possible explanation for the attacks, yet no money or valuables were removed from the couple's home. Later, media attention soon turned to Bessemer himself, as a series of letters written in German, Russian, and Yiddish were discovered in a trunk at a man's home. Police suspected that Bessemer was a German spy, and government officials began a full investigation of his potential espionage. Weeks later, after going in and out of consciousness, Harriet Lowe told police that she thought Bessemer was in fact a German spy, which led to his immediate arrest. 2 days later, Bessemer was released, and 2 lead investigators of the case were demoted due to unacceptable police work. Bessemer was once again arrested in August of 1918 after Harriet Lau, who lay dying in Charity Hospital, after a failed surgery, stated that it was he who attacked her more than a month previous with the hatchet. He was charged with murder and served 9 months in prison before being acquitted on May 1st, 1919, after 10-minute jury deliberation. The Axeman's next victim was Anna Schneider. She was attacked in the early morning hours of August 15th, 1918. The 8-month pregnant 28-year-old of Elmire Street awoke to find a dark figure standing over her and was bashed in the face repeatedly. Her scalp had been cut open and her face was completely covered in blood. Mrs. Schneider was discovered after midnight by her husband, Ed Schneider, who was returning late from work. Schneider claimed that she remembered nothing of the attack and gave birth to a healthy baby girl 2 days after the incident. Her husband told police that nothing was stolen from the home besides $6 or $7 that had been taken from his wallet. The windows and doors of the apartment appeared to have been not forced open, and authorities came to the conclusion that the woman was most likely attacked with a lamp that had been on a nearby table. James Glisson, who police said was an ex-convict, was arrested shortly after Schneider was found. Glisson was later released due to his complete lack of evidence and stated that he originally ran from authorities because he had so often been arrested. Lead investigators began publicly speculating that the attack was related to the previous incidents involving Bessemer and Maggio. The Axeman's next victim was Joseph Romano. He was an elderly man living with his 2 nieces, Pauline and Mary Bruno. On August 10, 1918, Pauline and Mary awoke to the sound of commotion in the adjoining room where their uncle resided. Upon entering the room, the sister discovered that their uncle had taken serious blows to his head, which resulted in 2 open cuts. The assailant was fleeing the scene as they arrived, yet the girls were able to distinguish that he was a dark-skinned, heavy-set man who wore a dark suit and slouched hat. Romano, although seriously injured, was able to talk to the ambulance once it arrived, yet died 2 days later to severe head trauma. The home had been ransacked, yet no items were stolen from Romano. Authorities found a bloody axe in his backyard and discovered that a panel on the back door had been chiseled away. The Romano murder created a state of extreme chaos in the city, with residents living in constant fear of the Axeman attacks. Shortly after the last attack, the New Orleans newspaper and news stations were sent a letter. The letter was addressed from the hottest of hells. In the letter, the Axeman taunts the police, stating, "They have never caught me, and they never will." In the letter, he says the police were making mistakes, saying, "I am not a human being, but a spirit, and a demon from the hottest of hells." In the letter, he made stabs at the victims, and details of the attacks were there that only the killer would know. He wanted the people of New Orleans. He warned the people of New Orleans that on 12:15 a.m. March 17, 1919, he was going to fly over New Orleans, stating, "I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether region that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned." He told the people he was the worst spirit and that they had ever seen, and he will continue to exist and kill as he pleases. The Axeman never struck on the night of Tuesday, March 17th. The Axeman next struck on the night of March 10th, 1919. Screams were heard coming from the Cormiga residence, and grocer Laurando Giordano rushed across the street to investigate. Upon his arrival, Giordano noticed that Charles Cormiga, his wife, and their daughter had all been attacked by the unknown intruder. Rosie stood in the doorway with a serious head wound, clutching her deceased daughter. Charles lay on the floor beside her, bleeding profusely. The couple was rushed to the Charity Hospital, where it's discovered that both had suffered skull fractures. Nothing was stolen from the house, but a panel on the back door had been chiseled away, and a bloody axe was found on the back porch of the home. Charles was released 2 days later while his wife remained in the care of doctors. Upon gaining full consciousness, Rosie made claims that Rondo Jordan and his 19-year-old son Frank were responsible for the attack. Rondo was a 69-year-old man, was in too poor health to commit the crimes. Frank Giordano, more than 6 feet tall and weighing 200 pounds, would have been too large to fit through the panel in the back door. Charles Gordamiga vehemently denied his wife's claims, yet police nonetheless arrested the two and charged them with murder. The next 3 victims all share similarities due to the fact that they were unthoughtful and sloppy. Steve Baca was a grocer who was attacked in his bedroom as he slept on the night of August 10, 1919. He awoke during the night to find a dark figure looming over his bed. Upon regaining consciousness, Baca ran to the street to investigate the intrusion and found his head had been cracked open. Then the grocer ran to the home of his neighbor, Frank Ginusa, where he lost consciousness and collapsed. Nothing had been taken away from the home, but once again a panel on the back door of the home had been chiseled away, and Baca recovered from his injuries but could not remember any detail of the trauma. This attack took place after the emergence of the infamous Axaman letter. Sarah Lumen was attacked on the night of September 3, 1919. Neighbors came to check on the young woman who had lived alone and broke into the home when Lumen did not answer. They discovered the 19-year-old lying unconscious on her bed, suffering from a severe head injury and missed several teeth. The intruder had entered the apartment through an open window and attacked the woman with a blunt object. A bloody axe was discovered on the front lawn of the building, and Lumen recovered from her injuries, yet couldn't recall any detail of the attack. Mike Pepitone was attacked on the night of August 27, 1919. His wife was awakened by a noise and arrived at the door of his bedroom just as a large axe-wielding man was fleeing the scene. Mike Pepitone had been struck in the head and was covered in his own blood. Blood spattered covering the majority of the room, including a painting of the Virgin Mary. Mrs. Pepitone, the mother of the 6 children, was unable to describe any characteristics of the killer. The Pepitone murder was the last alleged Axaman attack. In conclusion, the police never caught who the killer or attacker was. I believe this was due to the lack of technology and resources. In 1918 through 1919, they couldn't get tests for fingerprints as fast as they can today. The Axeman was famous and still holds a great example of just how far our forensic science has come.